Welcome to Three Crosses Farrier Company. I'm Caleb, and we're going to be shoeing Magic today. Some of y'all might recognize him from a previous video from a couple of months ago. We were at a barn that's over 100 years old, and we gave you a little tour of the barn. And we were trimming him at that time. Magic's going to some parades, so we decided to shoe him. He's going to be getting used a little bit more in the next month or so. Magic is part Shire, so that's where the size of these hoofs comes from. Shires have extremely large feet, and he's part Shire, so he has some big feet. This will be a two-part video series. This is the first part in which we'll do the front feet, and the second part will be another video in which we do the hind feet. A lot of people have commented and said they want to see all 4 feet. The algorithms with YouTube like to see videos that are like half hour. They seem to perform best between 15 minutes to 20 minutes. So I can't get all 4 feet done in that time period. So we're going to make a part 2 for everyone so y'all can see the hind feet on this horse. That video will be up in about a week as soon as I get it edited. Now you'll see all the flakiness. That's dead sole. Horses grow and callus much like humans do. If we were to walk on our feet without shoes, we would become calloused. The horse, they grow whether they're moving or not. In the wild, they wear this callus off, but in captivity they don't. And then you'll also see that moisture content affects the hoof a lot. So we've just gotten some moisture, so you can kind of start to see some of that black in the commissures. That's some thrush and some things like that, and bacteria getting formed in those areas. That's why we clean out the commissures. The commissures or the center sulcus in the frog are those deep canyons right there along the frog, and then the center sulcus is that portion of the frog right in the center, right at the widest point of the V. Now when you're running your nippers, it's super important. You need to keep them nice and flat so that you get a nice even nip line all the way around, so when you come back with your rasp, you don't have to work as hard to get the foot flat and level. In some cases, especially with a horse this big, I would heat the shoe up and I would burn it on. Magic doesn't like fire, so we don't burn them on. We have to do them cold. Again, cleaning up that center sulcus right there just a little bit, cleaning out the bar. The nippers that I'm using right here are 14s. On a horse this big, I would normally use my 15s, but my 15s had an issue and they're not very sharp, and there's some issues with them, so I'll use them later in this video, and they just weren't performing the way I wanted to. I was just having issues with my nippers. What I'm doing here is I'm getting rid of the distortion in that foot, and I used my nippers over my rasp because the nippers are a little faster, especially on something this big. And then we'll swing the foot forward, get rid of all of the distortion, shape the shoe, and nail the shoe on. Again, it's about keeping that rasp and keeping your rasping nice and level. You don't want to put big gouges in the hoof wall or anything like that. Right here, you'll see I'm rasping a little bit on the heel. Heel gets distortion just like toe, and on a horse this big, they're going to distort a little bit. And so we're trying to address all of that distortion and get the foot symmetrical as much as possible before we go to shaping the shoe. And we're just softening that corner just a little bit. just to get a nice symmetrical hoof. Now we're going to take the rasp, we're going to get rid of all the distortion, and we have our mark, or if you will, our reference point. So you'll see where I've rasped and cut with my nippers, and I'm going to rasp the foot to that point because I don't want to go past that, because I marked where the distortion was from the bottom. I can also see the distortion from the top, and so now when I come back and I'm finishing this foot up and getting rid of this distortion and gathering the hoof, I don't go past that little reference mark that I made for myself on the bottom. That's how I keep from thinning the hoof wall too much when I'm doing this. Now again, this horse is going for a parade, and I want to make this foot kind of pretty. So I'm going to spend a little extra time on this foot. I'm going to do some different techniques maybe that I haven't done in other videos, because this horse is going to go to parades and we want him to look kind of fancy. You'll also notice, if you look on my lateral branch of my shoe right there, you'll see 2 marks below the SX mark right there. That is my lateral. I mark my lateral branches so I know, so I can shape the shoe so it's, when it's in the fire, I pull it out, I'm like, oh, this shoe goes there, that shoe goes there. This was a size 4 Kirkart, so it's more like a 5. Kirkarts are kind of a half size bigger than most of your other shoes. You'll notice I'm not wringing my nails off, I'm just bending them over. That's something new I've started doing, and I actually really like it. The wringing the shoes off is kind of an extra step. I had a guy show me, and he's like, you don't need to. Try this. And it's worked really well, saves a step, and I actually get a little bit better finish work because I can control where my clinches are better. You'll notice that toe, my toe fit wasn't quite perfect, but it's pretty good. I'll take it. I'm still working on that. That's one of the things for me that's kind of hard, is if I miss my fit of my shoe, it's usually right in the toe, or the medial toe quarter is usually where I miss. But when I say miss, I'm missing by a 32nd of an inch, an eighth at the most. And you can see it right there. There's just a little bit. Didn't quite get that. I should have pulled that toe in just a little more on that lateral side. I'm using my loop knife here. This is a cheapo loop knife that I have on the truck. I couldn't find my actual gouge, so I'm using that cheapo loop knife to gouge. Gonna clinch. Now you'll notice, because I did the gouging, the nails, the clinches set down into the hoof wall, so when I come back with my little buffer, they're not going to sand those clinches off. This little tool right here I've had for a long time. I don't get to use it a whole lot because I just don't do a lot of these big horses like this. Usually I'll use a sanding block if I'm going to do something like this. But on these big horses, it saves a lot of time, this little tool right here. And it's actually an air bladder. So you put it in your drill, and then you can see right, just for a minute there, you can see there's a little air attachment right there, and you can hook it up to your compressor, put a little air in it, and that's actually what keeps that little round belt sander on the drill as it spins around. And you can put it harder or softer or whatever, you can adjust it a little bit. That is a really pretty foot. I do love doing some of these show horses. It's a lot of fun. Now, we have something cool coming up. This particular client is a lot of fun. She's in politics, and I happen to love to talk to my clients. So, a lot of our conversation throughout this video is muted. This video is about shoeing horses, and so I try not to mix, our little talks and whatnot. And a lot of my clients don't want everyone to know, like, we'll talk about things and, you know, family and things like that. And so I try to be super respectful of my clients and not put everything out there on the internet, and try to respect their privacy. But one of the things that we have coming up that I'm kind of excited about is we're going to be doing a podcast. We're in process of getting a studio and the equipment. I'd like to see what y'all think, because I've had people like, what are you talking about? What are you doing? And I'm like, you know, I should do a series of like Farrier talks or whatever, where I'm with the clients and we're talking about whatever. Because I actually shoot for some very intelligent, very talented individuals, and some individuals that have really amazing life stories. And it would be cool to share that with everyone here on the channel. So let me know kind of what you think there. If you're interested in possibly, if you'd be interested in a podcast, if you'd be interested in some video formats where the conversations, and you can listen to what we think and what we're talking about, and some of the stories that we get to hear. It's probably one of my favorite parts of my job, besides the horses, is getting to meet different people. We have some really talented folks in the area that I'm in, some really intelligent folks. And I learn a ton when I'm out shoeing. And we talk about books and all kinds of different things. And so I'd like to share that, and hopefully this podcast will be the outlet for that. Now here I'm using, as you can see, like an old set of nippers. My 14s were just not cutting it. These are a 15. They just weren't. They weren't right. These were just dull. I'd used them. I'd sprung the handles on them. And so whenever you're doing something like this, shoeing horses or otherwise, having the proper equipment makes life easier. If you're gonna do something professionally, you need good tools. Don't care if you're a contractor, if you're a computer tech, whatever it is, you need good equipment. And so I'd been fighting with my nippers for the better part of 3 months at this point. I sent, I think, a bunch of them to a company called Rafter V to be rebuilt. And it wasn't maybe 2, 3, 4 days after this that my 14s actually snapped. The rivet, the rein, the handle, where it attached to the rivet, actually came apart as I was nipping a hoof. And it happens. I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of nippers you use. This kind of stuff happens. Again, I'm using my nippers to get rid of some of that extra distortion. I'm trying to keep the lamini to the hoof wall symmetrical all the way around the foot, from the heel to heel. We're going to try and get rid of all of the distortion, gather that foot up. What am I talking about when I talk about distortion? Distortion is hoof wall that is becoming wider or potentially narrower, but mostly we use it in terms of wider than the rest of the hoof. So what causes that? Weight. Weight is the biggest contributor to distortion. Weight and travel pattern. So the way that the horse moves, the way that the horse walks contributes to distortion. So if a horse is hitting super hard medially on the inside, so he's stepping and he's hitting medial side first and then coming over onto the lateral side, to the outside of the hoof, that causes distortion. Where would the distortion be? Well, the distortion would be on the lateral side on the outside, because the inside is taking all the weight. So you'll see that start to contract, push up, and you'll see the lateral side start to widen and move away from the center of the hoof. And that is generally what we speak to as far as distortion goes. We also, the other word for distortion would be flare. In hooves, you're looking at this hoof. What we shoot for is a 60-40 weight ratio. So from the center of articulation, which is basically at the termination of the bars, and in a future video, I'll do a video on hoof mapping. And hoof mapping allows us to helps us picture what the hoof is doing. And so you'll draw lines at the widest point of the foot, the apex of the hoof. You'll draw lines at the center, from the center sulcus all the way to the toe, so the center of the frog. And then you'll draw a line at the heels. And you'll draw a line at the toe, and you'll draw two from the corn, from the heel to the intersection of the laminae wall. And I'll do a whole video on this in the future. It doesn't make sense when you try to explain it. It's much easier to show people, but that allows us to see the shape and kind of see what the hoof's doing, and develop an eye to see the hoof. And when we look at that, what our goal is we want 60% of the hoof behind the center of articulation and 40% in front. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm checking level. I don't put this in a lot of the videos that I do because it's kind of boring. Like, what am I doing? I'm dropping the foot. I'm looking at the foot. I'm super, super anal about balance. And so how do you check balance? You drop that foot and you let it hang loose. You put your head up against the body of the horse and you look down to see if that foot is level, because it doesn't matter where you think it's level, because if you twist the foot or you push the foot or you tweak it just a little bit, then you're creating a level that's not level for the horse. Again, there's my little reference mark right there in the toe. We're going to rasp to that reference mark. Get that all cleaned up. Again, when you're running your rasp, it's important that we're not trying to leave rasp marks on the hoof. We want a nice, flat, clean look all the way around. You don't want gouges. You want the rasp to move flat, level across the foot. Now you can see I got a little bit better fit with this shoe, and you'll see my lateral side marks. And when I'm nailing, I am pitching the nails to match the hoof wall angle. So the nails have a beveled side and a straight side. The beveled side always goes to the inside, and that way it pushes it out away from the hoof wall. If you do it the other way, the nail won't pop out, and you will most likely hit live tissue, and it creates a whole nother plethora of problems, which is not good. So we try to avoid that. That nail just didn't quite come out where I wanted it. The cool thing with these draft horses, or these Shires, drafts, any of this particular bloodline, is that they have a ton of hoof wall. So it is possible, but if you hot nail one of these, you really had to work at it. And when I say hot nail, we call it quicking, hot nailing. it's where the nail hits live tissue and causes pain to the horse. Potentially, some of the issues with that is lameness, number one. Number two, it can abscess, which is really not a good deal. It doesn't happen often, but any farrier that says it's never happened to him is either lying or he hasn't shot enough horses. Now you'll see here the nails are in an ascending line. Generally, that's what we shoot for. It doesn't always happen. Nothing's ever perfect sometimes, but we shoot for an ascending nail line. So back nail is a little lower, front nail is a little higher, and it should follow that pattern. Again, using my gouge. I do it two ways. I use a gouge, or I will use my rasp under the nails a little bit, get the burr, a little bit of hoof wall under the nail, and then I'll set the nail down. Gouging, I think, makes a little bit cleaner look. When that nail sets, it sets right down into the hoof wall. I don't do this all the time. I don't use the gouge method all the time. But on a horse that's gonna go show in the arena, gonna go do something a little bit more fancy, if you will, then I'll often gouge them. Not all the time, but in this case, I wanted to gouge them. I think it makes it look just a little bit cleaner. And I'm really happy with this particular shoe's fit. It was really, really nice. I couldn't have been happier with the way that this turned out. You'll see the little bit of a 45 grind all the way around. That just takes away the sharp edge so he can't step on it. You know, if he steps over on himself. I mean, they're horses. They're out in the pasture. They're fooling around. Things like that happen. I just really love doing these big Shire horses. They just turn out so pretty. Just do a little bit more buffing right here. You can see how nice and square those clinches look. That's one of the reasons I like to do the gouging over the other method. They just come out really nice. Also, when you're running your buffer like this, as I stated earlier in the video, it doesn't take the clinch out or sand it off. Add a little bit of hoof oil right here just to give it a little bit of a shine, a little pizzazz. These hooves just look so good, even if I do say so myself, and my opinion is probably slightly prejudiced here, so I apologize for that. But I do love my work. I love what I get to do every day. If you don't love it, you shouldn't be doing it. I'm a firm believer in that. You have to be passionate about what you're doing, and it is really fun to get to do these big horses like that. They just look so good when you get done. And that should about do it for Magic's front feet. There'll be a part 2 video in which we'll do his hind feet. Hope you all enjoyed this video. Let us know what you think of the idea about the podcast or a video series where we're just talking and having some fun. Like and subscribe. At the end of this video, you will find a link that will take you to the original video of when we did Magic at his barn. And we'll catch you next time.